on.
Thank you. Call the meeting to order. Roll, Jen, will you take roll call?
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Walters.
Here.
Commissioner Phelps.
Here.
Commissioner Corbin.
Here.
And Mayor Denner.
Here. Do I have, anybody would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
Make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Seeing nothing under appearances and acknowledgement, we'll go into the consent calendar. Is there anything we want to remove from the consent calendar?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Seeing nothing under unfinished business, authorize the mayor, we'll move into new business. Number 1, authorize the mayor to sign agreement, Dakota Plumbing Service annual septic dumping. Brad, this one's yours?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
As you might recall, earlier this year, we had a similar agreement with, now the name's escaping me right now. David New. Yeah, Complete Septic Service. And we have another pumper, Scott Van Manen, with Dakota Pumping Service that would like to have the same agreement. I've had a discussion with Rick down at the treatment plant, and in what has been proposed by Mr. Van Manen to do the types of sewer that they want to dump there, it was acceptable to Rick. So it's restricted to just domestic waste. In this case, he's got 2 customers of domestic waste that he'd like to dump here closer to town. So I'd recommend the commission approve this.
Same rate as the
Same
previous
rate,
agreement.
yes.
I move to approve that.
Second. I got a motion and a second. Any further comment, discussion? Not, all in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, authorize mayor to sign task order number 7 for professional service, DGR Engineering, 2020 electrical distribution conversion project. Brad or Chad?
I'll get this one.
Okay.
This is our standard upgrade project, if you will. This will be the last of the standard project. So we started this about 15 years ago. This will be the last one. And from this point forward, it'll be a little more selective, and we're going to have to determine which way we want to go. There's some thought process to taking the loop line and burying parts of that underground, so we'll have to decide which direction we want to go here in the very near future with our future monies. But for the time being, in 2020, we're going to do about a 12-block area. It'll consist primarily of an area south and east of Campbell's, and they'll do that whole area, convert that. That's the last piece of overhead to underground. Then we got several other small areas here and there where we want to replace the old exposed concentric cable. It's got XLP for an insulator. That XLP, after about 30 years, is susceptible to what they call treeing, and that happens when lightning strikes are nearby, and we've had a fair number of them here this last year. So that the insulation then trees, it splits, and it allows an arc to develop, and then the wires burn off. So we want to get those replaced here. They're about 30 years old. It's about time for them to start treeing and start having problems. So that's the other part of this. In this, the overall anticipated cost for construction is $675,000. The estimated cost and then the engineer's fee would be $69,800. Prepare the plan, specs, and construction observation and paperwork. Are there any questions about the proposed work?
Brad, when we were having our meeting on Tyler and getting new software, new meter readings and that, you're thinking about maybe going to fiber optics. Is that a time where we can put in a pipe that we can pull that at a later date?
I think that we'd have to look at the cost, and it would have been nice to have started this back 15 years ago when we were pulling everything in. If we'd have pulled another small conduit in there to allow that, I think that'd have been great. The way things are going, you got basically two paths. One of them is a wireless or radio frequency path. The other one would be a hardwired path. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. Long term, at the, if you will, explosive rate of data consumption, we're going to have something with a lot of bandwidth. And right now, currently, the best technology for that, in my humble opinion, would be fiber optic. And so that's something that we probably should have started some time ago, but as time goes on, I think that's going to be something to be real valuable. My recommendation would be to look at, if anything, putting in as we pull in the power lines, put in a spare conduit, small one, that would be capable of handling a small fiber optic. In this case, we would put in enough pairs so that we could have what we need for the metering and load management side, and then have some dark fiber that we could lease out to a service provider. But all we're going to do to start with would be to put in a piece of conduit so that they could do it. And we'll look at the cost of that and put it as an alternate in this case, so we don't have to do it if it looks like it's too expensive.
Thank you.
That'd be something we need to explore a little further as a commission, see if that's a priority. But good time to bring it up, Marshall, in terms of seeing what the cost would be to put the conduit in for now.
Dark fiber is always good. Gives you options.
There's plenty of upgrade work to do once this project's complete, correct?
There is. We got, again, there's several areas. We're still going to replace some cable. We got some new developments that are coming in that are going to have to be, brought up and put into electric right now. So that's going to, tax the crew somewhat next year. And then after that, like I said, the overhead loop line that goes around, the 13/8 loop line that was kind of the original line that was set up to feed all the mini subs. We'd like to have that hardened and start looking at maybe possibly burying that in certain areas. Some more than others, just because of the access and the trees and that type of stuff. So there's going to be plenty of work, and then there's some substation work. As we move forward, we'll look at the southeast sub, and getting new transformer down there at some point in time was what was anticipated. And obviously there's so many different things that impact that with True Shrimp and other things that I can't really tell you how that's going to go, so we'll have to wait for that one to play itself out. But that would change some things down there, and that would certainly keep the crew very busy with the construction of basically 2 new substations.
But this doesn't have anything to do with that. This is
No,
just
this is just
maintaining what we have right now.
continuing with our normal process, get the last chunk of overhead converted to underground, and then do selective replacement of reconductoring some of the underground that was done years ago that is old enough that the wire is going to start failing in that type of wire. This new wire that we're putting in, I have no reason to believe that it won't be here 100 years from now and functioning just the way it is right now. That old wire had a different kind of insulator that was susceptible to aging and treating.
Mayor,
Yes.
this is the last chunk of overhead of the cities.
Other than the big loop line, this is the only thing this is the last batch that would take us overhead underground. We would get rid of the 2400 system, and we'd get rid of 2 transformers down at the power plant, and a bunch of switchgear, that old switchgear. I don't know if you've been in the back of the power plant there, but there's all that bare copper out there. That would all be de-energized and no longer be needed. So we'd be able to take out the stuff that was put in, I think, in the late 30s, early 40s. It's served us well.
Got a lot of mileage out of that.
It served us well.
Okay, I'm just thinking would there be anybody else that would have any overhead at all? Any other?
There might be ones and twosies here and there, and we've been trying to pick them up. This year, we took care of a bunch of them up that were left over after we did upgrades north of 9th, kind of up by the community center to the west of there, and a couple other spots that when we came through and did our upgrades, for whatever reason, there's 1 or 2 blocks here and there that were left out. And for whatever reason, they didn't go north of 9th in some areas. And so we got most of those taken care of this year. Now we'll have a few stragglers in some other areas. We'll get as much as we can done from overhead to underground. And we've done some as our crew on their own and tried to get proactive on taking down the onesies and twosies that were left over and getting those taken down. We did that out west, by the bowling alley through that area, Super 8. We did that one. Several others down by Shopko.
So people might see some onesies, twosies, a few things, but the major operations are down now.
Yeah, the ones where we're going to hire a contractor and spend $600,000, those will be done.
Okay.
We might get some small ones here and there, but
Okay.
they should be much less expensive.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion, we authorize the mayor to sign task order number 7 for professional services, DGR Engineering, 2020 electric distribution conversion project.
Second?
And a motion and a second. Any further comment, discussion? Not, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Number 3, authorize the mayor to sign letter of contract for engineering service, Banners Associates, Inc., Park Creek Wall, and in our motion, we have to have it designating the funds come from general cash balance.
Yes, please.
Okay. Chad, this one's yours.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor and Mayor. Excuse me, Mayor and rest of the commission. Included in the agenda packet is a proposed service order from Banner Associates. And this is for work related to some of the damage we received on the creek walls in the September flooding event. We had 3 different locations where there was damages that are included in this proposal. One area between basically Egan and Hearth, there was 3 sections of the wall that collapsed, about 200 and I'm mixing my numbers, but there's 3 areas about 200 feet there. There was another collapse north of 7th Street. There was about a 50-foot stretch there. And then there's another area in Memorial Park. There was about a 125-foot section that didn't collapse, but it was it's been shifting probably slightly over many years, but there's visible evidence that it's shifted a little bit more.
Is that the long crack?
There's a long crack, and then if you look close to the wall, you can see some movement away from the bank as well, probably pretty close to collapsing there. And so what I'm trying to get done here is get an opportunity before the weather hits us to get some first priority is some survey and then some damage assessment before we're dealing with ice and snow in the creek, and we can't do that. If we can get this done before we get that type of weather, I'm optimistic we can try to do some repairs in 2020. Otherwise, if we don't, we're probably not going to be able to get in and do any type of a realistic assessment until water drops, basically, July next year, August maybe, and so that's why I thought it was appropriate to try to pursue this now. We don't have a disaster declaration for public assistance yet, but I think we anticipate there will be. It's likely that any of these repairs will be eligible for FEMA assistance to the tune of about 75% and about 10% state, and then we would have the balance of that. So to talk a little bit about some of the, I've worked on some of these walls, and the other departments have been working a lot on these preliminary damage assessments. And just for these wall areas that I just articulated, if we use a similar cost estimation that we did to repair the wall in 2011, it could be around $2.5 million, and that's just to repair some of these areas. And that would again be for about 415 feet or so. So it adds up really fast. So to that end, part of what the third phase of this work would include would be some alternatives analysis. In other words, do we have to put this expensive rock wall back up with the same stones placed in approximately the same locations? Or are there alternatives in select locations, probably locations away from the Memorial Park in particular, where there's some historic significance to it? So we're asking to look at alternatives, whether that's sloping some of these areas back where we have city property or enough right-of-way, or both, to put some other sort of protection system, whether it's a riprap bank or whatever it may be. That remains to be seen. We want to look at some alternatives. Other areas, we have other limiting factors as access, other structures, private houses, churches, very near the walls that may prescribe or require another type of repair. So we want to try to back up and take a more comprehensive look at it, because we have about 6,000 feet of this wall in town, and as it continues to fail, or we otherwise continue to do maintenance on it or replace it, I don't believe it's sustainable to replace it at the cost that we did for our collapse in 2011. And if we're required to use some of those same parameters, sometimes by historic folks and or FEMA or them together, it's just not a sustainable alternative, in my opinion. So we want to try to get ahead of the game to try to be able to be ready to present to FEMA and State Historic Preservation Office these alternatives. So that's another part of what I'll call phase 3. I think it's referred to in here as phase 3. Getting a little bit more specific into phase 1, survey that includes topo and utility calls, but also some property research as far as property boundaries, property pins, locations. We may need to get easements from landowners. Almost certainly we will, depending on any of the type of alternatives presented. So that's the survey. Also down in the creek, they'll be surveying the base of the wall with waders and so on and so forth. And the damage assessment also down in the creek, to try to really get a good inventory of the extent of the scour or the undermining of the wall is what's referred to as phase 2. And those both will happen, phase 1 and phase 2 primarily, before December preferably, and before we have inclement weather. Otherwise, most everything is included in here. It talks about any of the things I've talked about in a bit more detail. There's also some hydraulic analysis to make sure whatever proposals come forth, it's modeled properly so it can be permitted by FEMA to not cause rises, no rise in any improvements that are done. And with that, I'd be happy to just stand by for questions.
Kind of got confused here. Area between 5th, Southwest, and Egan. There's no rock wall down there.
I think
or is it up here on?
That's northeast, or excuse me, northwest.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I didn't know if there was a rock wall down there or not.
Nope.
So.
No.
We've been thinking about adding some.
Yeah. Thank you.
Get some rocks we can use?
We'll.
Well,
It's northwest. It's
well, you
northwest.
know, you
I
could
think that's Memorial.
take concrete, put up against the wall, and that'd work just as good as a rock wall. But,
Oh, and I think that's what he's
yeah, I know that's what.
digging there.
Because I've talked to him about
It
it.
was in another discussion today, earlier somewhere else also, so
Yeah,
yet to be seen.
yeah. I think all of us are well aware of what's in front of us with that creek, and whether we can look at it and say, okay, let's preserve the rock wall part, like in Memorial Creek, we've all kind of talked about that, and then what is it going to cost? And I appreciate your approach, Chad, as far as, this repair and putting a Band-Aid on it it's not sustainable. You're absolutely right. And whether that means concreting the whole thing, I don't know. I'm not the flood, I'm not the creek expert, but I'm looking forward to getting data on it and getting information about it. And one question that I have, Chad, is, and it's been mentioned by some citizens as well, you're talking of the no-rise certificate, and I understand some of that, but does that also include if we go higher than what the existing walls are today?
Well, whatever would be any proposed improvement, whether it's higher or not, I mean, the full analysis could be reviewed.
Okay.
Basically, if you want to connect the dots, if you will, from intersecting road to intersecting road, that would be your overflow point, so to speak, and so
Right.
we would have to consider.
If you go higher here, you
Right.
gotta still.
Right, it
Get
doesn't do anything
down
to go
underneath
high
the-
and you
the
get to the bridge and go down,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
all that'll be in part of the consideration of any realignments or rebuilds, perhaps, I don't get ahead of myself, but in that area where there's 3 collapses, maybe there's some options to decommission parts of that wall and go with another alternative
Right.
that is more economical to maintain and as
More
efficient or more efficient to convey the water through that. It just, it remains to be seen, but it's tough to back in the 95 study, it talked about what might need to happen to be able to convey larger rain events through town, and it would be tremendously significant. I mean, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's at something to the effect like 100-foot wide channel.
Right.
We know.
Right.
So that's why that alternative was quickly considered not viable.
Right.
For that type of a conveyance, and so that's why everything pointed towards what it did in that 95 study, which was some detention north of town. But nonetheless, if we look at addressing anything with, whether it's the bridge structures, but primarily here we're talking about the wall structures, we would make them the most efficient and well thought out as we could. We're also talking potential for talking with some other agencies, federal agencies on this, and we'll see how some of those things might come through, but we're just trying to keep all options open, particularly funding options, because this is unexpected cost, but even if at this type of this 2.5 million, that's just for these walls, even our 15% is it's not budgeted. I mean, that comes from somewhere. We have to come up with those dollars, so we're trying to keep a lot of different options open and come up with a plan, whether it's attrition when we have issues, we pursue fixes along the lines of alternatives we consider now, or we try to do the whole thing. I don't see that right now as something we're going to be able to do, but we're probably stuck looking at just trying to fix our bad areas as they collapse at this point in time.
This is a very tough issue, and I've been up and down many parts of our creek, and it's it'd be great if we had that 100 feet on both sides all the way down, and but when we have private residents whose their property goes all the way to the creek as well in some places, but and I'm thinking of even the church there on Egan, and I mean their edge of their building is awfully close, and boy, I'm just thankful it doesn't fall into the creek. I mean nothing we can do about it, and so that's part of the hard part of anything we do at the creek is, I mean, we got a lot of houses and backyards of people. Their fence is 6 inches from the creek wall, and we start clicking along and pulling down that creek wall, and that's going to potentially damage their fence as well, so it's gonna be tricky.
One of the areas is in this area, right, the fence is right on the top of the wall where the bottom of the wall's caved here.
Yep, exactly right.
Well, it looks like the study's going to address some of the lingering questions we've had, whether we can do something other than the rock walls. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they come back with.
And hopefully it's done by flood mitigation experts or experts in this area that are certainly smarter than all of us on this particular issue, so.
Absolutely.
On my end, I did discuss, with Marshall today that I would like part of the motion to be that this should come from the general fund cash balance. Then you would see it return to you for authorization through the supplemental budget process. Because according to Chad, we would assume that most of this work and the expense would be realized in 2019 yet, correct?
Probably for this work, maybe half.
Okay.
The actual main body of the repairs, or whatever it ends up, whatever comes to pass, would be probably 2020. So, yeah.
Do we, off the top of your head, can you tell me, I should look this up another time, how much money do we have in the rock wall fund?
50,000, did we just look that up, Chad?
There's a reserve with 50,000 we talked about last week, yeah.
And how much are we looking for?
This is 101 and a half.
And we did have that conversation too about whether we should apply that rock wall reserve, but we maybe agreed that there's gonna be enough expense in the future that we will definitely use it and probably make it part of our 2020 budget process. Knowing what's coming.
We discussed here among us, trying to decide about some of these reserve funds and using them. Is this not a time when we could use this reserve fund, and be done, it could cover some of these expenses?
We could probably use a reserve for when we actually go to do the work.
Yeah, that too. Either way, we're gonna use it.
Do we think this will be a reimbursable expense? I think we were talking about that earlier, but.
We think it is. Last time it was. Through the FEMA, I did some checking with Cody Kiefer, and he's done some outreach to some of his folks he's worked with, and pretty confident that this will be reimbursed, probably to the tune of about 85%.
Okay. Do you think there's any chance the historical preservation part closer into the Memorial Park might receive some funding assistance?
Through the historic. I've just started to look at that. We didn't pursue it in 2011. There's some grants available, but from some of the preliminary, I reviewed some of my notes from back then, and some of the dollar amounts that are available and the timing, we didn't pursue it then. But we'll look into it again now, because I've already talked.
I know you mentioned it in the beginning of your dialogue there, but I just.
Yeah. We'll continue to talk to the Historic Preservation Office, whether that's on these upfront dollars or actually during the repairs, if we can apply for some grants that might be available through them. There's not a lot of money that's available through them, just to be honest.
And I only bring it up, not because I have any great desires to spend rock wall money now or later. It's going to happen now or later.
It will.
It's just, I just thought if it's, are there any good reasons to use that money now as opposed to later, or good reasons to wait?
And due to some of our previous conversations, I appreciate that.
But I don't seem to be getting any strong feelings that.
We thought Jen and I had talked about trying to use the cash balance, correct?
It might be a little neater with the potential for reimbursement, I would think.
Right. Because of the fact that it potentially reimbursable by.
General fund cash.
Right.
That's fine.
I'll make a motion, we authorize the mayor to sign letter of contract for engineering services, Banner Associates, Park Creek Walls, with the funds coming from general funds cash balance.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further comment, discussion? Not all in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Number 4, authorize the use of Park and Recreation Fund swimming pool repair reserve leak repair at Madison Aquatic Center.
Lori could not be with us this
Right.
evening. Kelly, do you want to speak? You want me to speak? You want to tag team it?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
fine.
Have talked to Lori a number of different times. You'll remember that she was before you here several weeks ago when we had to bring in the leak detection entity to find where the leaks here at the pool were. We have done that. At that time, you authorized the use of the swimming pool repair reserve up to $9,000. We spent about $6,000 with that.
Did they find it?
They did.
Did it?
Okay,
What'd they
did
find?
found several areas, several joints further discussed in here, because now we can use MC&R Pool, who is a normal vendor, to fix these. And I do believe Lori was working on still getting that done yet
Yes,
this
yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Right?
We're hoping that we can do this the fall, but this fall yet, but if not, certainly early in the spring, as opposed to having discovered it and then waiting. You know, one of the things we talked about with Lori is moving it as quickly as we can on this, if nothing else, at least on the discovery, which we've done. So that's, we know what the problem is. Now we'll see if we can, how quickly we can get it repaired.
So the document that you have in front of you this evening does list a list of specifications, what it is that they will do, repairs that do need to be made for the estimate of $29,633, which we would like to come from the swimming pool repair reserve at this time. As discussed with the mayor this morning, right now there's a balance of $60,000 in that reserve. We will have spent $6,000 of that for the American Leak Detection Company, which will leave us with certainly enough balance to do this project here, and we'll probably, again, during the 2020 process, in the next couple of weeks, ask that you add back to that reserve. Questions for me at all?
Is the pool going to be able to open on time next year?
I'm confident that this having found out that what the problem was earlier this year, you know, that we might have a shot at getting it open on time, I'm sure.
Can you guarantee it won't be raining and warm enough?
Can't, But I'm pleased that and Lori was too. It was, for a while, the economics of it, just finding out about what the problem was going to be, well, astronomical. And so,
A little bit scary for a while.
yeah.
Does this guy guarantee his work for the repair?
I haven't talked to him.
But I would make a motion to authorize the use of Park and Recreation Fund swimming pool, repair reserve, leak repairs at the Madison Aquatic Center. Do you want it at that?
Up to 30?
Up to
We go
$30,000.
please.
Up to $30,000.
Are we gonna request a guarantee on his work for 30,000?
Yeah, we can request it, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I would imagine they would have that, but that's a good point.
Okay, with that, I'll second that motion.
Got a motion and a second. Any further comment, discussion? Not all in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. Number 5, authorize use of Park and Recreational Fund Christmas Lights Reserve Holiday Decoration Repairs. Mike, this one's yours. If you want to come on up, please.
Well, it's time to start thinking about Christmas, I guess. So we dug the Christmas lights out, the snowflakes and Christmas trees that go on Egan Avenue, and the wiring is absolutely shot on them. We've been limping them by for the last 3 years, and every year we say we got to get these fixed. half the time they don't work. The electricians are up there with their bucket truck trying to get them back on. So we're gonna save the frames to save money and put on our own wiring harness and wire them up. So I'm asking for up to, Kelly, what do you want to go with? $4,200 out of the Christmas reserve.
I'd say 45, Mike, just for sure.
45,
How much is in there?
10,000.
4,500 out of 10,000.
How long do you think it'll take you to rewire all them?
That we have them completely dismantled right now, and we're waiting for your approval. Order them, and we'll start working on them.
Do you need anything else?
Not for this year. When the 4-lane highway project comes through, there was talk of new banners and some kind of Christmas decoration banners on the 4-laner, but we don't know where the light poles and all that stuff, so we waited till the project's completely done. And in prior budget talks with Christmas decorations, another entity is supposed to help out with 50% of the Christmas decorations from the city. So, I mean, I don't know. I can tell you what these cost if we replace them on Egan Avenue, and we don't have enough in our budget, in our reserve right now.
I'm just curious, the new lights that are going up on Highway 34 east of town, can we touch those in the median? We can? Are you thinking of doing anything on them
I mean,
too?
if we
Kind of
can,
extending,
I mean, we'd be willing to do it as long as we could find the funds to do it. I mean,
Sure.
I just, the park fund, we all know how that works, so.
yep.
Did we pay more so we could hang stuff on them? I don't even remember now.
Yes.
We did for along the highway. I need to double check to see if we did approve it, because we have to pay more. The DOT changes the footing design and so on and so forth. I'm not sure about.
About
what else they have.
36,000 if my math is correct for all the different things we paid for the DOT this year. And I believe a good portion of that was for the increased size of the footings and the festoon lighting sockets and all that, if I remember correctly.
It's worth it.
And it cost a little more on the electric side because in order to have the festoon lighting, we had to stay at 120 volt, which meant that they had to have more feeds, and so it cost a little more to feed it. So I do know that's all in there.
I will say, we've talked a couple of times about this Christmas light reserve over the years, Jen and I have. What are we gonna use it for? Here we are.
Look at you knocking
Yeah.
out reserves tonight, Kelly.
I know, knocking them down like dominoes. I make a motion to authorize the use of Park and Recreation Fund Christmas light reserves in the amount of $2,500 for the repair of the holiday decorations.
4,500.
45.
Okay, all right.
Second.
When do you normally get them up?
Usually we used to put them up the day after Thanksgiving on the Friday, but since the city switched our vacation, we'll put them up the Monday after Thanksgiving now.
And we should be all right with getting them done.
Yep.
Okay. Any further comment, discussion? If not, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Jen, we have any public
We
comment?
do not.
Okay. Announcements. I have one announcement. I put in, I talked to Chuck, and I did talk to Sue at KGM about putting a comment in on Friday to help the limited access on Washington. I think that helped a lot. I appreciate both that. I was out there a couple of times, and most people were either taking the bypass or Egan, so, which made their work a lot easier. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else? Announcement? If not, we will go into executive session.
What? Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay.
We were talking today, Mike's over there, we were talking about, we're looking for a Christmas tree for the city Christmas tree. We don't have one, and we haven't been, no, oftentimes somebody comes forth and says, you can have mine if you'll take it down and haul it away. So, I don't wanna create a,
Just tell them if somebody has a tree that's accessible that we can remove with that crane. It has to be the right size. We've had a couple offered, but they're not big enough because we're gonna have so much that goes in the ground.
So, if you know somebody that is, have them get a hold of Mike, I'll take a look.
You don't
at
have
it
a
and
tree
see.
lined up yet?
My suggestion is we find a tree in the park and we start cutting the lights on in the park area.
We have a tree that we
That we
find
don't have
some,
to cut one down.
and I think that's probably where we'd like to go in the future, is just having a place where we grow a tree or have a tree that is.
Should we plant a
the
tree there?
Christmas tree.
Will
With
light
the
it
lawn?
up in 20 years?
How big of a tree could you spade in there?
I think that it's not our property, so you better talk to the property owner.
But for this year, we're gonna continue probably what we've done in the past, okay? So we're looking for a tree. We will look though possibly at in the future, maybe other alternatives rather than all the things we have to go through to find a tree, cut it down, haul it in there, put it in. Maybe find a tree that we can have, still have the city white Christmas tree, but have it be maybe in the middle of the parking lot of the Methodist church. I don't know, something like that.
Well, we have a backhoe, we can dig a hole.
Thank you.
Okay.
Make a motion, we go into exec.
Second.
All in favor, signify by aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. I think I'll just decorate it down by